Our time is right now. This is Carolina Coral in the studio. Welcome to everyone joining us on Freedom. Let's get straight to the important news. Sumy and the region are once again under attack by Russian drones. The strikes hit 2 districts of the regional center. As a result of the attack, warehouse facilities were damaged and fires broke out. According to the Sumy military administration, there were no casualties in the city. Last night, Russians also struck several communities in the region with drones. Residential and non-residential buildings were damaged, and 2 civilians were injured. There were also explosions today in the Kherson region. In the morning, Antonivka came under attack from Russian drones. A civilian was caught in the shelling. He suffered a blast injury and shrapnel wounds. The man is already in the hospital, receiving the necessary medical care, according to local authorities. The Russian army is deliberately targeting civilian vehicles on the M14 highway between Kherson and Mykolaiv. This was reported by the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, Alexander Prokudin. He strongly advised against traveling this route unless absolutely necessary and warned that if Russian drones resume their attacks, the highway will be temporarily closed. Let me remind you that the day before, a prosecutor's service vehicle came under attack and 2 people were injured. Earlier, it was also reported that 1 person was killed and more than 20 were injured as a result of drone attacks on the M14 highway. Russia launched 59 drones at Ukraine on the night of August 26th. This was reported by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Ukrainian defenders neutralized 47 drones of various types in the north and east of the country. There were drone strikes at 9 locations. In the morning, things were also tense in Crimea, which is temporarily occupied by Russia. Explosions were heard in the towns of Krasnohvardiiske and Dzhankoy. This was reported by local social media groups. According to the monitoring channel Crimean Wind, there was a preliminary strike on a railway substation in Krasnohvardiiske. There is also information about a possible hit on an oil depot near the railway station in Dzhankoy. A few days ago, there was already a strike on a fuel train in the city. At that time, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed the strike on the railway station in Dzhankoy. It burned for almost a week, and only this morning were they able to extinguish the fire at the oil refinery near Rostov. Of course, we're talking about the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery, which was attacked by Ukrainian drones 6 days ago. This facility is the largest fuel supplier in southern Russia. Local authorities concealed the cause of the fire, and in order to put out the flames, they shut off the water supply to the entire city of Krasny Sulin. 35,000 people live there. The United States of America is studying the use of drones in the war that Russia started against Ukraine. This was stated by U.S. President Donald Trump the day before. At that time, he was speaking with journalists at the White House. He emphasized that never before have hostilities been conducted using drones.
There hasn't been a war of this scale since World War II. This is the biggest event in military history and a completely new form of warfare. This is a war with the use of drones, something that hasn't happened before. We are studying it, Pete Hegsted and everyone else, and we are studying it very closely. This is a completely new form of war, but it is a brutal war.
The EU is preparing to introduce new sanctions against Russia and to strengthen military support for Ukraine. Next week, a summit will be held in Brussels with the participation of ministers from EU member states, as well as a meeting of foreign ministers. There, they plan to discuss the use of revenue from frozen Russian assets and to agree on the 19th package of anti-Russian sanctions. My colleague Kristina Dombrovskaya will tell you more in detail.
The European External Action Service is preparing the 19th package of EU sanctions against Russia. Its goal is to force Moscow to come to the negotiating table. Russian crude oil still remains the main lever of pressure, according to several European publications. Next week, at the summit in Brussels, the foreign ministers of the European Union will, among other things, discuss the use of revenue from frozen Russian assets. The EU has done everything to ensure that these funds remain frozen and do not end up in Moscow's hands, said European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde in an interview with Fox News on August 24. We're talking about $300 billion in sovereign assets frozen in Europe. We believe it is entirely legal for the income from these funds, that is, the interest earned on the principal amount in the account, to be used to repay loans provided by the European Union and the United States. Ukraine has submitted a proposal to the EU for the 19th package of sanctions against Russia. Kyiv hopes that the European Union will include restrictions against Russia's oil infrastructure in this package. This was reported by Vladislav Lesyuk, the Ukrainian president's advisor on sanctions policy.
Ukraine is also seeking sanctions against the captains of the so-called shadow fleet, maritime terminals, port infrastructure, and possibly insurance companies. Another broad topic is the defense industry. We are proposing a number of new categories of goods and substances to expand the list of critical components. Vladislav Lesyuk, advisor to the President of Ukraine on sanctions policy, speaking live on the United News telephone.
According to Politico, the 19th package of EU anti-Russian sanctions will be considered on August 30th at the level of foreign ministers under the chairmanship of Denmark.
Sanctions need to be imposed. They should be constantly extended and strengthened if necessary, in order to force people to sit down at the negotiating table and reach a peace agreement.
Meanwhile, in one of Russia's regions, gasoline is no longer being sold to civilians. This was reported by the Moscow Times.
Since August 20th, restrictions on fuel sales have been in effect in the Kuril Islands, no more than 10 liters of gasoline per person. Since August 17th, a gasoline shortage with hours-long lines at gas stations has occurred in neighboring Primorai. At the same time, gas stations in Zabaykalsky Krai and the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea returned to the Soviet-era practice of selling fuel with ration coupons. From the publication by the Moscow Times.
The fuel crisis swept across Russia after at least 7 major oil refineries were hit by drone strikes in August, and 5 of them, including the largest in Russia, completely or partially halted production. According to the Moscow Times calculations, about 13 facilities in Russia's oil refining industry were paralyzed, which amounts to 44 million tons per year. Amid the gasoline shortage, wholesale prices hit historic highs, almost 73,000 rubles per ton for a 92 and more than 82,000 per ton for a 95. Since the beginning of 2025, prices have risen by 40% and 50%, respectively. To cover the shortage, the Russian government imposed a complete ban on gasoline exports starting August 1st. Ukraine's foreign intelligence reported that Russian companies are urgently buying oil from Belarus to address the domestic shortage. Kristina Dombrovskaya for Freedom TV channel.
India will reduce its purchases of Russian oil by 20%. Bloomberg reports this, citing sources. The reason is the increase in tariffs on Indian goods by the United States of America. They will take effect as soon as tomorrow. And according to analysts, oil shipments from Russia to India have been declining for at least 4 consecutive months. If in March Indian refiners were buying over 2 million barrels per day, then in July it was just over 1.5 million. An explosion occurred on a tanker from the Russian Shadow Fleet off the coast of Chikaka. 2 crew members were injured. This was reported by the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. Russian propagandists insist that there was no oil spill, of course trying to downplay the significance of the accident. However, this incident points to the critical condition of Russia's tanker fleet, as emphasized by the Center for Countering Disinformation.
Due to sanctions, Moscow has lost access to quality repairs and certified spare parts, so regular accidents have become commonplace. Explosions, fires, and spills of oil or toxic substances are a direct consequence of the shadow logistics that the Kremlin uses to try to overcome sanctions pressure. From a statement by the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Facebook.